Leg broken, love awoken. My husband's betrayal. Chapter 1. Nora, why are you just standing there? My leg is broken. Get me to the hospital where Kimberly is interning now. Joseph Coleman's bark cleared the haze from my mind, and I realized I was standing in the living room while he lay motionless on the ground, having fallen from the third floor. He ground his teeth through the pain of 2 shattered legs and still managed to glare at me with disgust and suspicion. Nora, if you take me to the nearest hospital again and make me lose Kimberly, I swear you'll suffer a death worse than you had the last time. Those words cleared away the last of my doubt. I had come back to life, and at that same moment, Joseph came back too. In my previous life, Joseph was one of my admirers. He once saved me from a fire, and I married him out of gratitude. I poured my parents' inheritance into his startup and supported his dream until he became the CEO everyone praised. When he clocked out, I stayed at the office drafting deck after deck until midnight. When his mother, Diane Lowe, needed surgery, I did the bedside care myself and never handed a single task to anyone else. I spent everything I had on our family and on his career. And yet, all that work was lost to one favor for his childhood sweetheart, Kimberly Parker, who wanted her internship made permanent. In my previous life, I hadn't sent Joseph to Kimberly's hospital as he insisted. As a result, Kimberly failed her probation and jumped from a building. He blamed me for not taking him to her care. Then, in his rage, he took the wheel and mowed me down, leaving me to die on the road. What a joke. I gave him devotion and got a bloody death in return. He wanted Kimberly to operate, didn't he? Fine. This time I would give him exactly what he asked for. I wanted to see if his legs would still have any chance of being saved after nearly 2,000 miles on the road. Nora, take me to the hospital where Kimberly works. She's waiting. Don't forget what will happen if you don't do as I say. Afraid I might defy him, he bared his teeth and snarled like a cornered dog. Just then, Diane walked out of the house and saw how badly off Joseph was. Have you lost your mind? The hospital where Kimberly works is almost 2,000 miles away. By the time you get there, your legs will be beyond saving. No way. Nora, take him to the nearest hospital right now. I kept my cold smile to myself, masking it with a worried face as I looked at her. But he insists on going there. Don't listen to him. We all know Kimberly's just an intern. What surgery could she possibly handle? Nora, stop standing there and get Joseph to the nearest hospital. I'm not going, Joseph shot back. If you don't take me to the hospital where Kimberly works, I'll die right here in front of you. Seeing Diane hold her ground only made him dig in deeper. He glared at both of us, his eyes full of vicious warning. I let the corner of my mouth curl with the smallest hint of mockery, then sighed as if I had no choice. All right, Diane, we'll do it his way. I'll drive him over now. Chapter 2. No, Diane didn't budge an inch. Joseph may be raving, but you can't lose your senses too, Nora. Kimberly isn't qualified for a surgery like this. She hadn't finished when Joseph exploded. Don't you talk about Kimberly like that. I know exactly what she's capable of. Then he shot me a fierce look. Kimberly just wanted a full-time position. She wouldn't risk my life and she'd never hurt me. Nora, you're the petty one. If you had just done what I said, Kimberly wouldn't have died. I knew he was talking about the previous life, but I wasn't about to tip my hand. Diane looked confused, so I played along and let my brows knit. What are you talking about? Why would Kimberly die? Joseph studied my face, as if confirming I hadn't come back with him. Arrogance and glee flashed in his eyes before he snapped. Get me to her hospital now. If she dies, you won't live either. I clenched my hands until my nails dug into my palms, holding back the hate that threatened to spill out. The memory of tires thudding over my body roared through my head. I wouldn't relive that kind of pain and helplessness. Joseph had done it once, which meant he would do it again. This time, I wasn't giving him the chance. Diane, missing the subtext, threw up her hands. You really are crazy. Nora, tie him up and get him in the car, she shouted, her whole body shaking with rage. I didn't want to tip Joseph off that I remembered anything, so I made a show of obeying and stepped toward him. He snatched up the nearest heavy thing and hurled it at my face. "You bitch! If you don't take me to Kimberly's hospital right now, I'll beat you to death." The heavy object crashed into my temple. Diane yelped in shock. Joseph caught my wrist, yanked me to the floor, and drew back both fists to pound my head. Even with his legs broken, he was stronger than me, and I couldn't break free. Diane screamed and finally caved. "Enough! Stop! If you hurt Nora, who's going to drive you to Kimberly?" Joseph stopped, victory gleaming across his face. I held my throbbing head and shoved myself to my feet. The gloating in his eyes only fueled the fire in my chest. We drove nearly 2,000 miles with me at the wheel for a day and a night without sleep, and we rolled in the next afternoon. Diane and I rushed his admission. While Diane arranged Joseph's surgery, Joseph noticed the attending was Kimberly and tore the consent form in half. "I told you, I'm only letting Kimberly operate." A young nurse tried to help. "Dr. Parker isn't on today. Your legs look very serious. You really shouldn't wait. Let one of our surgeons take you." Diane drew breath to argue, but Joseph had already called Kimberly. Kimberly answered in a sweet tone, "Joseph, you've arrived? Sorry, I didn't expect you so soon. I'm walking my dog. Please wait for me. I'll head over now." Diane's chest heaved with rage, her eyes rolling back at the ceiling. "It's fine. I'll wait," Joseph said, gritting through the pain. "With me as your case, they'll have to make you permanent." Seeing this, I couldn't help but find it bitterly laughable. I hadn't slept or had a sip of water all day, yet he hadn't spared me a single word of concern. But now, I didn't need his concern anymore. This time, I wanted to watch those legs rot if that was where his devotion to Kimberly led. We waited and waited, but Kimberly still hadn't turned up. Joseph's panic deepened by the minute, until even the surgeon on call couldn't stand it and pulled me aside. "You're his wife, right? He can't stall any longer. If he keeps waiting, he could lose function for good. Pick another surgeon and sign." Before I could answer, Joseph cut in with a grim expression. "You're just trying to take Kimberly's case. Forget it. Kimberly's doing my surgery." He turned that warning glare on me. "Listen, only Kimberly can treat my legs. If she isn't here, I'll wait until she is. If you don't want me to divorce you, then keep your mouth shut and do as I say." I didn't waste my breath on a response. From the moment I opened my eyes in this second life, my very first thought was to sever all ties with him. But what I wanted to see even more was how an inexperienced intern would handle a surgery like this. Chapter 3. Another hour crawled by before Kimberly finally sashayed in while wearing stilettos, a full set of acrylic nails, and makeup caked on like she was headed to a photo shoot. Diane had been packing herself into a fury. The second she saw Kimberly, she grabbed the gurney to wheel Joseph toward the operating room. "Good, she's here. Let's get him in now." Kimberly yanked the gurney to a stop and blinked, all innocence. "Wait, I thought I was supposed to operate on him." Diane fought the urge to roll her eyes and gave Kimberly a once-over. "How are you going to operate dressed like that? You don't even have a license. You're just an intern who got here through connections. If anything goes wrong with Joseph, can you take the responsibility?" The attending, who had been trying to talk sense into Joseph, couldn't hold back. "Dr. Parker hasn't performed a single case here. Letting her take the lead is extremely risky. It could cost him more than his legs." I chimed in, pretending to persuade him too. "They're right. Operating rooms are sterile. I've never seen a surgeon in heels and a manicure. Joseph, think this through. You're risking not only your chance to walk, but your life." Kimberly pursed her lips, her voice carrying a note of hurt. "Joseph, I rushed over because I was worried about you. That's why I didn't change. Nora looks down on me. If none of you want me, then let someone else take it, if I can't be permanent." Before she could finish, a slap landed on my face. My cheek burned while Joseph glared at me with cold disgust. "Cut the jealous act. Kimberly's about to be made permanent, and you're not standing in the way this time." I covered my burning cheek, my gaze darkening into quiet scorn. He thought I was standing in the way, but I was only letting things run their course. This time, I wanted him treated by Kimberly even more than he did. Diane snapped, fury blazing in her eyes. If she were good enough to go permanent, she wouldn't need to use you as a stepping stone. Look at her. What part of her looks like a surgeon? Joseph remained unmoved. She rushed here because she was worried about me. That's why she didn't change. This is just a leg operation. Even if it isn't perfectly sterile, it won't matter. Kimberly is handling my legs and I trust her. Nothing you say will change my mind. He snatched the new consent form from the nurse, scrawled his signature, and slapped it down. I've already signed it. If anyone gets in the way, I would rather lose my legs than let someone else touch them. At that, Kimberly dropped the pout and shot me a smug look. She whisked the gurney out of Diane's hands and sashayed toward the operating room with Joseph in tow. There was nothing the surgical team could do except Kimberly as primary and scrub in behind her. 3 hours later, a scream ripped down the corridor, and the operating room doors finally swung open. Chapter 4. The operating room doors burst open, and the surgical staff spilled into the hall in a panic, with Kimberly at the front of the stampede. Diane, already strung tight with worry, lunged for her the second she appeared. "Why are you running? Where is my son?" Before anyone could answer, the screaming from inside climbed to a higher pitch. The commotion drew the chief doctor and a swarm of nurses on rounds. "This is a hospital, not a flea market. What is going on here?" The chief doctor, David Stone, snapped, and the noise fell off at once. Diane had already rushed into the operating room the moment she heard Joseph scream. In the sudden quiet, only sobs and screams broke the air. David strode into the operating room, and I followed right behind him. Joseph lay on the table with blood soaking both legs, his face chalk white, howling in pain, and on the verge of blacking out. David moved in fast. "He's spiking and convulsing. Start cooling now. Full workup stat." Orders flew, and the nurses fell into motion. "Who is the surgeon for this patient?" David demanded, his eyes flicking to Kimberly and the scrub staff. Kimberly was hesitant, but when the others tried to speak, she gave a small warning cough and hurried to speak first. "Dr. Stone, I was the attending physician for his legs." Seeing Joseph had passed out, Diane stepped up and slapped Kimberly across the face. "You bitch. If you hadn't insisted on operating on Joseph, would he have ended up like this?" Tears pooled instantly as Kimberly turned on the waterworks. "Mrs. Coleman, this isn't my fault." Then she pointed straight at me. "Nora brought him in way too late. The delay is the reason why it's so bad. I did everything I could to save his legs." I knew she had no shame, but I hadn't expected it to go this far. David's brow furrowed as he rounded on me. "How could you do that? His legs are in terrible condition. Why did you wait so long to bring him here?" Everyone turned to stare at me after his words. I opened my mouth to answer, but Joseph came to, clinging to consciousness long enough to croak. "Don't blame Kimberly. This is all on Nora. She was jealous of how close Kimberly and I are. She dragged her feet and made me miss the best window." I had expected him to flip the story, but hearing it out loud still made my hands shake with anger. A patient muttered, "She's heartless. She can be jealous all she wants, but life should come first. If he loses his legs, she's the one who'll suffer for it too." A nurse whispered to another. "When she dropped him off earlier, she didn't seem concerned at all about his screams. She's so indifferent." "She's probably already cheating and hopping he doesn't make it," someone else said. When she realized the crowd was on her side, Kimberly lifted her chin and gave me a smug look before her expression turned pained. "Nora, I never thought you'd be so vicious. If you don't love Joseph anymore, then divorce him. Don't drag him to his death." Joseph piled on. "You're wicked, Nora. Once my legs are healed, I'll divorce you." I stared coldly at the two of them as a shout rang out from the hall. "Mr. Stone, the test results are in. Both legs are badly infected and he's septic. He needs surgery right away and we'll have to amputate both legs." Chapter 5. The room fell into silence at the news. Joseph's swagger drained away, and he stared at the nurse as if he'd misheard. "What did you just say? You're telling me you have to amputate my legs?" David skimmed the labs and scans, his brow tightening before he answered. "Yes, and we need to move fast. If we wait, the infection will spread, and it won't just be your legs at risk." Joseph shook his head like he could rattle the words loose. "No, that's impossible. Last time I was fine." I almost laughed. The only reason he kept his legs last time was because I got him to the nearest hospital immediately. Even then, the surgeons said that if they'd come in just a bit later, they might not have been able to save his legs. He'd fallen so hard it even affected his manhood, but I'd kept that to myself so he wouldn't fall apart. "I don't buy this," he snapped. "You're a bunch of hacks trying to pad the bill. It was only a fall. How could it be this bad? I trust Kimberly. She said it was just fractures." He turned to Kimberly like a drowning man to a dock. "Kimberly, you said it was just a simple treatment. I don't really need the amputation, right?" Kimberly parted her lips, but nothing came out. A beat later, her eyes grew wet and she took his hand. "Joseph, I could have fixed it, but Nora delayed too much. There's only so much I can do now." The last bit of hope flickered out in Joseph's eyes. Diane's face twisted with hatred, and she slapped me so hard my ears rang. "I told you to take him to the nearest hospital, but you dragged him all the way here. This is on you." A chill spread through me. After losing my family in the fire, I treated Diane as if she were my own mother. When she needed a heart stent, I stayed by her side day and night. She had seen everything and knew what Kimberly was capable of, but she still laid the blame on me after hearing what Kimberly said. Everyone was looking at me like I was the villain. I drew a slow breath and said coldly, "If you all believe this is my fault, then prove it. Run the intraoperative audit and tissue cultures. Let's see if his legs were lost because of a delay or because they were mishandled in surgery." Panic flashed in Kimberly's eyes before she masked it with outrage. "Stop twisting things, Nora. I have proof you wanted to kill Joseph." She whipped out her phone and held it up for everyone to see. When I saw the video on the screen, my heart sank. Chapter 6. The video showed me, and a man leaning close in a cafe, the angle making it appear intimate. A ripple of shock swept through the room, every stare that followed spelling out their judgment. Kimberly jumped at the chance before the gasps died. "Nora, you cheated on Joseph. That's why you dragged your feet when you knew how bad Joseph's legs were. You wanted him dead." Joseph bared his teeth like he could bite through the pain. "You filthy liar, you had an affair. God damn you." Diane wound up to slap me again, but I shook off her hand. I looked straight at Kimberly and let out a mocking laugh. "If you want to smear me, at least show real evidence. I've got proof you got this job by pulling strings." Kimberly's face blanched, drained of all color. Right then, the voice I'd been waiting for came from the doorway. "I'm sorry, Ms. Vale. Traffic held me up." The man from the video entered the room. Another wave of whispers rolled through the onlookers. I ignored them and nodded with a smile. "Thanks for coming, Mr. Tucker. Hand me the file." 6 months ago, I knew Joseph and Kimberly were already having an affair, but I had no evidence. So, I hired an investigator and an attorney to gather it. In my previous life, I hadn't yet collected the evidence when Joseph fell and broke his legs. After that, I heard Kimberly had died, so I let the matter rest. But that decision cost me my life. So, the moment I came back to life, I called my attorney. With the folder in hand, I didn't hesitate. I laid out photo after photo of the two of them all over each other, plus videos and intimate chat logs, right where everyone could see. The onlookers streaming the scene turned their phones toward the evidence. "Holy crap, what a twist," someone blurted. "They've been together from the start and tried to frame his wife for it all." Wait, isn't that the young CEO making headlines? I guess money really does make loyalty cheap. Kimberly lunged at me to snatch the file, but I stepped aside and dodged. Then, I laid out the rest of the evidence, exposing how an untrained intern had posed as a doctor in the hospital. The crowd erupted in shock and anger. This is a top hospital. How on earth did you let someone with no medical training treat patients? We want answers. David and the others hadn't expected the fallout to hit the hospital. They moved at once to check Kimberly's credentials. After all, if this blew up, the hospital would bear the greatest impact. Kimberly's arrogance was gone, replaced by panic. She quickly tried to defend herself. It's not true, she's framing me. My attorney, Mason Tucker, stepped forward and said firmly, "We deal in evidence. Ms. Parker, you and Mr. Coleman engaged in an affair while he was married, and he spent $1 million on you. On Ms. Vale's behalf, we will seek a full recovery." "No," Kimberly cried. "I don't have that much money. Joseph gave it to me willingly." She reached for Joseph, but Diane slapped her hard across the face. "You bitch! If you hadn't insisted that Joseph come all this way for you to treat him, his legs would already be on the mend." The painkiller was wearing off, and Joseph groaned. "My legs hurt again. Kimberly, you told me you were skilled, and that the hospital was keeping you from becoming permanent out of prejudice. Why are they saying you're untrained?" Fear crept into his eyes as he looked at Kimberly. I couldn't help but laugh. I thought what they had was true love, but when it came to life and death, fear took over. The staff David had sent out came back with several executives from the hospital. "We verified it. Kimberly was brought in by the former deputy director before he left. She isn't a medical graduate at all. She only bought a vocational nursing certificate." At those words, the last trace of hope slipped from Joseph's face. Chapter 7. Joseph stared at Kimberly like he couldn't process the words. "Kimberly, you mean you had no real experience and still dared to operate on me?" Right then, a nurse stepped forward. "I can testify, Kimberly doesn't know how to operate. The patient's legs could have been saved, but she cut blindly, punctured a vessel, and caused a severe bloodstream infection. That's why the amputation is now necessary." Another nurse added, "I'll testify too. She mishandled the patient's leg, threatened us to keep quiet, and then tried to pin it on Ms. Vale." Joseph's eyes went bloodshot as he glared at Kimberly. Diane finally lost it. She lunged and started swinging at Kimberly in a flurry of fists and kicks. Kimberly couldn't hold her off. She snatched a scalpel from a tray and jabbed it toward Diane, but someone nearby grabbed her wrist in time. Diane was about to unleash her fury, but Kimberly suddenly burst into frantic laughter. Then she blurted out, "You're the idiots here. You knew I wasn't qualified, but you still let me treat him. If he's ruined, that's on him." Diane's rage boiled over, while Joseph's pain spiked so sharply that he blacked out. The surgical team rushed him back into the operating room. Kimberly seized the chance to run, while I stayed in the hall with Diane to wait. When the surgery ended, both of Joseph's legs were gone. He woke to a blank stare, his eyes fixed on the space where his legs used to be. I dropped the divorce papers on his blanket and said coldly, "Sign it." Joseph grabbed my wrist like a drowning man. "Nora, I was wrong. Give me another chance. I can't lose you. Kimberly seduced me. This is all on her." I shook him off and let out a cold laugh. "You didn't say that in your previous life." Color drained from his face. He stared at me in disbelief. "You came back too." He seemed to have put all the pieces together. "So you did this on purpose. You knew Kimberly couldn't handle it and still brought me here." "This is what you wanted," I retorted. "I just did as you asked." His lips trembled, but nothing else came out. He refused to sign the divorce papers, and I wouldn't waste another moment there. I had solid proof of his affair, so I called Mason to prepare the divorce filing. Then I walked out of the hospital. Diane ran after me, clutching my sleeve with tears streaming down her face. "It's all Kimberly's fault. Nora, please don't leave us." I pried her hand from my sleeve with a cold smile. I had never wronged them, yet they had hurt me again and again. I had more important things to do than waste time on them. Chapter 8. When Joseph launched the company, he didn't know the first thing about running one. I made the calls behind the scenes, negotiated with investors, and turned his pitch deck into an actual business. Now that we were divorcing, there was no universe where I handed the reins back to him. Once I'd secured control and cleaned up the cap table, the court date finally arrived. That morning, Joseph called me for the first time since everything went down. "Honey, I'm not divorcing you. I'll prove myself with my actions." I hung up, not wanting to hear a single word from him. But that afternoon, Joseph lured Kimberly to his place and stabbed her to death. I wasn't even surprised. In the previous life, he ran me down with a car for her. Murder wasn't a huge leap for him. What he would never know, though, was that Kimberly hadn't jumped because her internship didn't become permanent. The former deputy director who quietly took her into the hospital was afraid someone would find out. So, he lured her to the roof and shoved her off. I learned that truth only after I died, when the whole reel of my life played back in flashes. "Nora!" Joseph's voice came suddenly from behind, and a cold sweat broke across my back. I turned around and saw him standing in the doorway, his eyes locked on me with menace. He'd fitted himself with 2 prosthetic legs. When he saw me look at him, a rush of frenzy and elation flickered in his eyes. "Nora, I failed you in both lives. If Kimberly hadn't thrown herself at me after the deputy director dumped her, I never would have strayed. But God gave us another chance. Now, I finally understand you're the only one who truly loved me." He pulled a knife from behind his back and started toward me, his voice tipping into madness. "Let's try again in the next life. I'll treat you twice as well, and I'll have my legs back." He actually thought killing me would hit some cosmic reset button. I stumbled back until my shoulder hit the window. I was cornered. Without hesitation, I grabbed the nearest chair and hurled it with everything I had. He tried to dodge, but prosthetics could never pivot like living limbs. The chair slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. I punched the intercom and shouted for my assistant. Within seconds, half the office poured in. By the time the police cuffed him, he was still howling at me. Why do you treat me like this?" I looked at him coldly and said nothing. There was nothing left to say. This ending was of his own making. Given the attempted murder in my office, the judge granted an immediate divorce. Joseph would never get another chance to come back to life again. He would only rot in jail. I took full control of the company. On the day I flew the entire team overseas for a reward trip, I spotted Diane on a downtown curb, picking through recycling. I spared her only a brief glance before looking away. Mercy was too precious to squander on the ungrateful. As the plane lifted off the runway, my staff burst into cheers. I nodded at them with a smile, then turned to the window. The city fell away in ribbons of light, and a soft smile tugged at my lips. My new life was finally beginning. The end. And that's a wrap on today's reading here at Booked for Drama. If you felt anything, rage, swoon, secondhand heartbreak, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow drama lovers. If you have any requests, drop them in the comments. Until next time, keep reading and keep the drama on the page.